Hi, I'm Zoe from Zoebakes, and today I am going to make a crusty bread. And I have my trusty little assistant. Our new puppy is right here under my feet, so he will be of great help, I'm sure. This is a really easy loaf to make, and it's super delicious. So give it a try. If you want to try a sourdough loaf, I also have a video for that as well. Okay, let's get started. All I need to do for the first step is make what's called an autolyze. And really, that's just a fancy way of saying that I'm gonna let some of the flour and some of the water rest together in the bowl and relax. And what this does is it improves the texture of the bread, it improves the crust, it makes it easier to mix, which is really the important part in all of this, is that the whole thing is gonna come together really easily if you do this first 15-minute step. So this tiny little step makes a big difference. So what I need to do is measure about 125 grams of my flour. The entire recipe is linked below, so you don't have to memorize this. 125 grams. I can't really see it. Oh, in there. That looks good. Okay, 125 grams of the flour and 100 grams of my water. This up to, great, perfect, close enough. It really doesn't matter if you're a couple of grams off for this. I'm gonna take a wooden spoon and I'm just gonna stir this together. I'm gonna let this sit and relax for about 15 minutes. And like I said, just doing this little bit in the beginning is going to give my bread a better crumb, a better crust, and it's gonna mix together better. Some autolyze in recipes, you use all of the flour and all of the water, you let them rest together, and then you add the yeast, and if you're adding any sweetener, you can add that too. I find if you do that, it's harder to incorporate the yeast. So I like just doing a little portion of the flour and the water and let that relax, let the gluten develop. It's going to help everything else come together in the end. So I'm gonna cover this up, get a wet towel, and we'll come back in 15 minutes and finish up mixing our dough. The autolyze rested for 15 minutes, and now I'm ready to add the rest of my ingredients. I should have mentioned that I mix that in the bowl of my stand mixer because this next part goes together way easier if you're doing it with a stand mixer. You can do it with your wooden spoon and do some kneading, but if you have a stand mixer with a dough attachment, man, is that easier. So just dump the rest of the ingredients in. Let me just real quickly show you what we have here. Really nice and sticky and stretchy, and that's what the autolyze does, is it relaxes the flour and marries everything together and makes it into this really stretchy dough, which is going to improve everything about your loaf. So the rest of our flour goes in, the rest of our water can go in. Our yeast, I am using regular granulated yeast, but this is called platinum yeast, and it has just the tiniest bit of a dough enhancer in it. It's an enzyme that helps to strengthen the dough and make it stretchier and stronger. You can use regular granulated yeast, or you can find platinum Red Star yeast. Either one is going to work just fine. A little bit of honey. I forgot my spatula, so I'm just gonna use my finger to get it in there. the tools we have. Okay, our little bit of honey. I'm using honey because I love honey, but honestly, it's not enough to really taste it that much. It's just the touch of sweetness to it, and it's going to feed the yeast because the yeast will eat any kind of sugar, including the starch from the flour itself. So you don't even need a sweetener in there. If you don't want to use honey, you can use sugar in its place. And now we are just gonna let this knead on low speed at first until it comes together for about 5 minutes. I may turn this up to like a medium low and really get it mixing. Okay, so I forgot one key ingredient, and that is the salt. Salt is so key to bread because if you don't have salt in your recipe, the bread is going to taste flat. It's just not going to have any depth of flavor. So you want to have salt in your recipe, and I forgot it. So I'm going to be adding this baking salt, and luckily this baking salt is formulated. It's a really, really small crystal, so it's actually formulated to break down really quickly, which is perfect for this. Since I forgot it in the beginning, baking salt is going to be perfect. You could add regular table salt, you could add kosher salt, but this baking salt is really, really fine, so it's going to break down quickly and mix into my almost finished kneading bread. Another minute and we're all done. Okay, that should do it. Our dough is kneaded. It's very, very soft. That's what we're going for. And now we are going to cover this up and let it rest for about 20 minutes. And then I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna give it a little fold and then we'll let it rest again. Okay, so 20-minute rest and we'll come back. I'm gonna cover it back up with our wet towel so that it doesn't dry out. And we'll come back and finish up. Okay, we've been waiting for 20 minutes and Kilo is ready to see what the dough looks like. And there it goes. It has definitely risen a little bit. But what I want to do right now, because it's not ready to shape into a loaf, but what I want to do is I want to take my bowl scraper and I want to pull the dough up from the sides, it's a little sticky, from the sides up into the middle and just give it some folds. This stretches out the gluten, but it also gives it a little bit of shape to it as well. And that's it. Probably 5 or 6 folds like this into the middle, shape it into a bit of a ball, make sure all of that dough ends up back into the bowl. And now I'm going to cover this up. So that was 20 minutes. I'm going to cover this up and give it a full hour to rise. So you can see what we've got right now. It's way down there. When we come back after the hour, it should be about doubled in size. So back with the wet towel so it doesn't dry out, and I'll see you in an hour. Okay, our dough has been rising for an additional hour. So it was 20 minutes, I folded it, then an hour, and then look. It's doubled in size, it's nice and puffed up and beautiful. Before I take it out of this bowl, I want to get my proofing basket or banneton prepared. So what I'm going to do is coat it with flour. The best way that I've found to do that is use a tea ball that I save for this purpose. Just get some flour in there and really give it a good coating, because if you don't have a good coat of flour, this sticky dough is going to stick to the basket. And we don't want that. We want it to fall right out of here once it has risen in the basket and gotten the really beautiful shape. So my basket's all prepared. So I'm just gonna set that aside. I'm gonna put a little bit of flour down on the counter so that my sticky dough won't stick to the counter either. My basket is prepared, my counter has flour, and now I can take my dough out and look at it. It's beautiful. It is doubled in size at least. It's puffy, it's risen, it's gorgeous. I'm gonna use my bowl scraper to get it out of the bowl because it is quite sticky and I don't want this just stuck to my hand. I am just getting along the edge of the bowl so that I'm not compressing all of that air that we just developed in our dough. And spill that out as best you can onto the counter. Look at it. So pretty. I just love it. It's just like magic that you can mix together essentially flour, water, salt, tiny, tiny little bit of honey, and the yeast, and this happens. It's beautiful. Okay, a little bit more flour. Again, I just don't want this glued to my hands. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take that bottom that's on the floury surface and fold it over. I'm trying to get that sticky middle part in the center so that the floured part is what my hands will touch. If it's sticking to you, you can use your scraper and ease it up like that. You want to use enough flour that you're not getting frustrated. So that looks great. And then I'm just gonna keep sort of folding it into the center to get it into like a ball shape. Okay, and then just a tiny bit of flour on the bottom, and then I'm gonna flop it over. So now this isn't sticky anymore because it has the flour on it. Now what I wanna do is actually scrape some of this flour away, because having the underneath side of this loaf stick just the tiniest bit to my board is going to be helpful in getting the shape of the loaf. And what I want to do is I want to use the sides of my hands here, and I want to just slide the dough over like that. You can see now it's like an oval shape, and then I'll take this end and slide it towards me again, and then just keep sliding it around. And what I'm doing is I'm tightening, it's called a gluten cloak, and I'm tightening that top skin into a nice tight ball, but I'm not compressing it. I'm not kneading out any of the air that's in there. I'm just sliding it under itself almost. So taking the ball of my hand and I'm just sort of sliding the loaf over, and it just sort of creates this nice skin on the top of my loaf. See how it's getting to be a nicer shaped ball. If it starts to stick, get more flour. And then we'll just keep going until I have a nice tight ball. If it's starting to stick on the counter like that, again, you can just use your tools. I'm gonna flop it back over, pinch it into the ball shape, and now what I wanna do is lift it into my basket. I want that floured side, the down side, to be in the basket. I'm just gonna sort of take these, plop it in there, and then just sort of pinch it shut. That's it. So a little bit of the dough got on my hands, but not too bad. Use enough flour that you're not getting frustrated. The first time you do this, it's gonna feel odd and sticky, and you'll just use more flour. If you were watching me, you could tell that I wasn't really using a lot of force. It's really kind of gentle motions to move it around and just let the dough tell you what it needs. If it's getting sticky, put more flour or use your tool. Okay, so now I need to cover this and let it rest in here for up to an hour. This will depend on how warm your kitchen is, how warm the dough was, but about, I would say, a half an hour to an hour, and then we can bake. So I am also, at the same time, gonna preheat my oven to 475. Okay, we are ready to score and bake our loaf. It has risen. Before I put the plastic on, I sprinkled the loaf with a little bit of flour so that the plastic wouldn't stick terribly. But as you can see, it stuck just a little bit. So just ease it off so it doesn't change the shape of your loaf. Then we're gonna take a piece of parchment paper and put that right on the top of the surface, just very gently. And then we're gonna invert this onto the counter. Oh, look at that, fell right out. If it doesn't fall right out, you can just stick your fingers up into the basket and ease it off there. But this one came out beautifully. Now I wanna score it, either with a lame or a straight edge razor. I find that a sharp knife can work, but it also can drag on the wet dough. So I find one of these tools to be best. I'm just gonna do a very, very simple score. And that's just a straight line across the loaf. You get creative, you can be as artistic as you want. There are lots and lots of ideas out there on the internet. This is just my classic, simple, everyday move. So take my razor blade and I'm going to go about a ½ an inch deep. That way the loaf will open up beautifully. If you don't go deep enough, the loaf can crack open and go any which way. So you want to go about a ½ an inch deep. My vessel is preheated to 475 degrees. And then you want to have it readily available so that the second you score that loaf, you can plop it down in there. I'm using the parchment paper as a sling so that I can carefully get it down in there, close it back up, and then I'm gonna put this into the oven for about 35 minutes, and then we're gonna check it, take the lid off, and continue to bake. So I'll show you what it looks like in 35 minutes. Here we go. Okay, so the loaf has been in the oven for 35 minutes. We're gonna take the lid off. Look at it. It's gorgeous. It rose up, it's beautiful. It does actually have some color to it, but I am gonna let it go for another like 10 minutes. Keep an eye on it, 10 minutes more, and then it'll be like this deep caramel brown color. And the color is where the flavor is, so you don't want to skimp on the color. So 10 more minutes in the oven with the lid off to get some color, and we'll be back. Okay, it's done. It's a beauty. I forgot my spatula, so I'll be right back. I need a spatula to get the loaf out of the Dutch oven without burning myself. Look at that. It's gorgeous. Yay. I'm gonna put this loaf right onto the cooling rack so that it can cool all the way around. I don't want to leave it inside of the vessel because as it cools, the bottom crust will get soggy. Okay, that brings us to the next step, letting it cool. I know it seems like we're done, but the cooling is part of the baking process. If we don't let the loaf cool and we tried to cut into it right now, it would seem soggy. You would cut into it, you would think it was underbaked, and that's because all of the steam that's still inside that loaf has to dissipate. It has to evaporate out of there. It'll make the crust crispy, but also like shatteringly thin. So you just have to wait. It can take about an hour for it to get to room temperature. This is really the hardest part. But yeah, we gotta wait. So an hour, I'll come back and then we get to slice into it. But it's gorgeous. Woo! Look at how pretty it is. And it smells incredible. You can hear it sing. That's when the crust, that's the steam coming out of the crust and it crackles, and that's what we call a singing crust. Oh, it smells so good. Okay, we'll be back. All right, we waited. The loaf is totally cool. Hi, puppy. Can you hear the crust? Sounds awesome. And now we get to bust into it. I've got some butter. A really nice, sharp, serrated knife is my go-to for slicing bread. It has a great crumb. It's nice and soft on the inside, a beautiful crust. I'm like salivating. This one has a really nice even crumb to it. If you want something with a nice open hole structure, you'll have to try my sourdough loaf, and I have a video for that. So this is like an everyday sort of rustic boule. And if you want sourdough, try that one too. You'll have one for every day. This one uses yeast versus sourdough. You pick or do both. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel and share it with all of your friends. And leave a comment and let me know what else you would like to bake. That slurping in the background are my poodles drinking. I can't believe they're not here to ask for bread. This is their favorite part.